In a previous video, I spoke about the 4 elements, which were sometimes called the 4 temperaments in traditional medicine, and what that looked like in our body. So think of this as part 2, so I'm going to add a little bit more detail to that so you can get a really good understanding of what that's like and how we're all connected to these elements. So I mentioned that the fire element, which in the old school of the Greeks was called the choleric type, which means yellow bile. That actually means fiery, or the heat, the hot bile. And so in a person's personality, you'll see a choleric or a fire personality show very strongly because that person radiates power. And sometimes you can see it in their physical makeup as well, although it doesn't always equal the same. So if you see a person with fair skin and reddish tinge in their hair, and they've got really striking eyes and very distinct eyes, penetrating eyes, then you'd say that their body type is very fire, very choleric. And their temperament may also be that way. But our temperament does get influenced by many factors in life as well, which is what I've also spoken about, how our family patterns can create this structure of who we become in the first 7 years of life. But we've also got the flavour of these elements inside us. So how would you know if you're dealing or speaking with a person who's a choleric or a fire type? They're going to be very clear in their conversations. They're going to enjoy wanting to challenge you. And deep inside, they actually want to be challenged as well. Although initially, depending on their state of awareness, if they're very aware, they'll love it. They'll enjoy a good debate, a good argument even. Because to them, life is about challenges and meeting those challenges. So you'll sense power radiating out of them. How do they look physically? They're usually very well muscled. They're quite strong physically, and they love good physical exercise and movement because that's the fire energy. It thrives on a challenge. Okay, let's go now to their opposite. I mentioned before, that's the water element type, the phlegmatic type. What do they look like? So quite often in their physiology, they'll have a more watery look in their body. They'll quite often have a rounded face shape. And they're very soft. Their skin will be very soft. And if you touch them or you shake their hand, you'll notice their skin's very soft. And so physically, they'll tend to be more fluidy, especially if their body's out of balance and they're absorbing too much stress and tension. They'll be the types who'll hold and retain fluid a lot. And that's that phlegmatic, that fluid part in them that's showing itself in their nature. What will their voice be like? Be quite gentle, very non-threatening, non-challenging, opposite to the fire type. So the water person's going to be very easygoing. You're going to enjoy talking with them because they tend to agree with everything. And if you ask them what do you want to do, they'll say, oh, whatever you like, that's okay with me. Because they're so easygoing, they flow like water down a river. And they're lovely to have around, but don't ask them to make up their mind about something important because they'll tend to defer that decision quite often to someone else. But really, ultimately, they need, as they get balance, is to make up their mind, become more like the fire person. So they're soft, they're gentle, and their musculature tends to be more fluidy. Their musculature is not so well defined, okay? Their bony structure can be a little bit weaker and softer, and so their joints aren't as strong as the choleric type, the fire person who needs vigorous exercise and needs challenges. The water person, no, that doesn't work for them. They're much happier in situations where they can do slow, passive movements and gentle exercises. Don't ask them to do too harsh, vigorous exercise. It's too hard on their body. But get them to do some gentle type yoga, non-physically harsh things. Don't get them to do CrossFit. That's too harsh. Soft yoga, vinyasa, yin yoga. Get them to do tai chi, qigong. They're happy as, because that's the slow movement and flowingness of the water element. Okay, now let's go to the air type. They traditionally were called the sanguine. Sanguine means air and nerve. Sanguines, as I mentioned before, they're very happy with new things and fresh things. So sanguines, their body build tends to be more tall quite often and slender, well muscled, well defined muscles, but flexible. They have an incredible flexibility about them. So the sanguines, or the air types, are really good with balance and flexibility. So if they do yoga and stuff, they're great at it. They're good at dexterity. You know, they can use usually both hands quite well. Their flexibility in their mind can show in their body if they're a true sanguine type through and through, from temperament to physical makeup. And as I mentioned before, what do they like in their personality? They like new things, they like fresh things. They get a bit bored quickly. So if you're doing the same old thing all the time, the sanguines can start yawning a bit, because they want new things, they want fresh things. So in their personality, if you want to get a sanguine person to be interested in what you're doing, show them something new, give them something fresh, give them a new option to do something. And this is particularly good with children who are in that sanguine, or that spring stage of their early life. They love new things, fresh things. That's that sanguine part. Now let's go to its opposite, which is what I mentioned before, was the melancholic, or the earthy type. That's the dark bile. The earthy type people have a more solid structure. So if you look at their face, they have a more squarish looking face. Their physical body tends to be more squarish and structured. They can be quite solid built, not necessarily as tall. Earth type people tend to be a little bit shorter in their physical structure, but they're quite strong and solid. So the word solid, if you think of Mother Earth, she's very solid, isn't she? And she's very stable, and she's very patient, and she allows us, you know. That's the beauty of Earth. So in an Earth person, they tend to take longer to think things through, but they think them through very carefully. So patience is their virtue and their gift. They're not the type that really wants to make a big noise. As I've mentioned before, they're quieter, they're more intuitive, more reflective inside. We can all be intuitive. Perhaps intuitive is not the right word, but logical and deductive. But Earth people have good instincts quite often. And I'll say to them, listen to your gut instincts. What's your gut feeling tell you? Because that's the Earth part, that's the digestive system. So Earth people need longer to think things through and chew things over. But usually when they come to a decision, it's a really good one. It's well thought out. So Earth people are the builders. They're the type who like to think things through carefully. They like systems, they like programs, they like starting at the start, following the system, and finishing at the end. And if you're logical and down to earth and common sense, that works for an Earth person. So you don't get too airy-fairy and you know, space cadet. You'll lose an Earth person straight away. They just think you're totally not grounded, you're making no sense. So an Earth person, they're the reliable ones, and boy are they loyal. And they're usually innately very honest. They're very truthful and honest and loyal. So if you want a patient, loyal friend, you go get an Earth person. You want a job to be done properly and done well and finished, go get an Earth person. So like I said, that reflects in their physical structure, the squarish face, solid, steady, constant build. They're not fast movers. They walk solid. They're connected with the earth. So that's just to give you a little bit more addition to understanding the 4 different elements and kind of what they will look like if they're radiating that temperament.